Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on a piece of anatomy that looks so simple in a diagram, but is just unbelievably complex in how it works. The larynx.
It really is.
And our goal here, for you, the learner, is to try and translate those dense 2D drawings into a dynamic mental image.
Exactly, because when people think larynx, they immediately jump to voice. But our sources are really clear that this organ has three totally essential and separate jobs.
Right.
It's your air passage, first and foremost. It's also the organ of phonation voice production.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe most critically, it's an incredibly effective sphincter.
A sphincter for airway protection.
That's the one.
And that protective role is the one that gets overlooked, but it's literally life and death.
Okay.
So our mission today is to really zero in on the structures that let it switch between these roles so quickly.
Yeah, the mechanics, the layers, and some really surprising clinical consequences that come from all those tiny details.
So where do we start? Positioning.
Let's start with its position, which is anything but static. The larynx is mobile. You can feel it shift upward every single time you swallow. That process is called deglutition.
And it's different depending on age and sex.
Well,
Right.
very different. It's higher up in infants and in adult females.
But the big visible change is in adult males. Post-puberty, it dramatically enlarges and drops down.
And that's what gives you that very prominent feature, the laryngeal prominence,
Uh-huh.
what most people call the Adam's apple.
Okay, so let's unpack the architecture. This whole machine is built on a framework of cartilages.
Mm-hmm.
We've got three single ones, the thyroid, the cricoid, and the epiglottic, and then a few important paired ones. The arytenoid seems to be the one that does all the work.
It's the cornerstone of movement, absolutely. And we have to talk about what these are made of because it directly impacts, imaging and how they age.
Okay.
Most of the main structure, so the thyroid, the cricoid, the base of those aerodynamics, it's all hyaline cartilage.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing is this hyaline cartilage starts to calcify, to ossify around age 25.
So they basically get harder, less flexible over time. You'd see them on an X-ray.
Precisely. By middle age, they're quite dense on a radiograph. But look at the exceptions.
Okay.
The entire epiglottis and the very tips of those crucial arytenoid cartilages are made of elastic fibrocartilage. And that type resists calcification.
Ah, so the parts that need to stay flexible for vibration and protection, they're built to last.
That's it. It's a subtle but really profound bit of structural engineering.
So let's visualize the big three, starting with the largest, the thyroid cartilage. I'm picturing two plates, laminae that fuse in the front.
And right there, that fusion point is the great pitch determinant.
How so?
Well, in men, those plates fuse at a really sharp 90-degree angle. In women, it's much wider, more like 120 degrees.
So the sharper angle in men creates a longer space front to back.
Exactly, which means longer vocal folds. And longer folds vibrate at a lower frequency.
Deeper voice, simple as that.
Simple as that.
We should also probably flag the oblique line on the side of the thyroid. I see it's a big attachment point for muscles.
A key landmark, yeah.
Yeah.
Three big neck muscles attached there. Sternothyroid, thyrohyoid, and thyropharyngeus. There would help move the whole larynx up and down.
Got it. Okay, next up, the cricoid cartilage.
The anchor. And this is crucial. It is the only laryngeal cartilage that forms a complete ring all the way around the airway.
So it's like a foundation.
Think of it like a signet ring. It's got a narrow arch in the front and then this broad, flat plate, the lamina, in the back. It's the base that everything else moves on.
Which brings us to the epiglottis, that leaf-like elastic plate.
Pure protection. During swallowing, it just bends down and back.
To cover the airway.
Right. It diverts food away from the trachea and shoots it back into the esophagus. It's partly passive, pushed by the tongue, but also actively pulled by muscles. A perfect little roof.
And the folds of mucosa around it create some important spaces, right? The
Oh.
vallecula.
Yes, the vallecula. That little pocket is what an anesthesiologist is aiming for with a laryngoscope blade to lift everything up and get a view of the vocal folds.
What about the pre-epiglottic space?
That's a fat-filled pocket.
Yeah.
And it's clinically important because if a tumor breaks through the cartilage there, that space becomes a highway for cancer to spread.
Okay, so this framework isn't just a static skeleton. It's all about movement. What makes it so dynamic are the joints.
Two main ones. The primary pitch adjuster is the cricothyroid joint.
Okay.
It's a pivot point. The movement is rotation, kind of like closing the visor on a helmet. When you close that visor, the thyroid and cricoid get closer in the front.
Which pulls on the voltifolds from front to back, stretching them.
Lengthens them and tenses them up, and more tension means higher pitch.
So that's how we change pitch. What about opening and closing?
That's the other huge joint, the cricoarytenoid joint. This is where the magic happens for breathing and speaking. It allows two movements,
Rocking and gliding.
rocking and gliding. Rocking swings the vocal processes out and in, which opens and closes the gap. And gliding brings the two arytenoid cartilages themselves closer together or further apart.
So the arytenoids are basically the little joysticks controlling the back end of the vocal folds.
That's a perfect way to think about it.
Okay, so now that we have the frame, let's go inside the cavity. You mentioned membranes that define the spaces.
Right, there are these intrinsic fibroelastic membranes just under the mucosal lining.
Two main layers, I see. The top one is the quadrangular membrane.
Correct. It runs from the epiglottis back to the arytenoid, and its bottom edge, which is free, forms the vestibular ligament.
And below that?
Below that, you have the canus elasticus. It's sort of funnel-shaped. And its superior, free edge is absolutely critical.
Why is that?
Because that thickened edge forms the vocal ligament, the core of the true vocal fold.
Okay, so using these ligaments as dividers, we get three distinct regions inside. Top one is the vestibule or supraglottis.
The entranceway, bounded by the epiglottis and these aeroglottic folds.
And this is where we find that first huge clinical point.
A massive one.
Yeah.
The mucosa lining this supraglottic region is incredibly loose. It's like a sponge.
So if it gets injured,
If you get a burn or a bad infection or trauma, the tissue just swells up incredibly fast. That's edema. And it can completely block the airway. It's a true medical emergency.
so that spongy texture is a key feature. Now, the middle part of the cavity, that's where the folds are. Two pairs.
Two pairs. The upper ones are the vestibular folds or false vocal folds. They look pinkish because of that loose vascular mucosa we just talked about.
But they don't make sound.
Not primarily, no. They're more for protection.
Yeah.
Between them and the true folds is a little slit, the laryngeal ventricle.
Then that leads to the saccule.
Yes, and the saccule is like an oil can for the engine. It's packed with glands that secrete mucus to lubricate the true vocal folds, which importantly don't have glands of their own.
Ah, so they need external lubrication.
Right.
And then the main event, the true vocal folds.
The stars of the show. And they look completely different, pearly white, when you see them live.
Why so white?
Because the mucosa there is extremely thin, and it's bound down super tightly to the vocal ligament underneath. There's no spongy layer.
And there's another clinical gem in that microstructure, right? Ranky space.
Ranky space. It's the superficial layer of the lamina propria. Because everything is so tightly bound down on the true fold, swelling, that edema, it rarely extends below the folds.
So the swelling from the supraglottis stops there.
It generally does, but Reinke's space itself is a classic spot for fluid to build up, which we call Reinke's edema. And it's also where an early vocal fold cancer might be contained before it spreads deeper.
And the gap between those true folds, that's the rhemoglottis.
Which is the narrowest point of the entire airway in an adult.
Okay, and finally below that we have the infraglottic cavity, the subglottis.
Right, from the folds down to the bottom of that cricoid ring. And because the cricoid is a complete rigid circle, it can't expand at all.
Which makes it a bottleneck.
A huge potential bottleneck. It's very vulnerable to subglottic stenosis, a narrowing, especially in kids or after intubation trauma.
Okay, so to make all this work, we need muscles. A dynamic system. Let's group them by what they do.
Absolutely. We have to start with the abductor, the opener.
The posterior cricoarytenoid, or PCA.
And this is a high-stakes, must-know fact. The PCA is the only muscle that opens the rhemoglottitis, the only one that pulls the vocal folds apart.
Wait, hold on. Only one muscle opens the airway, but multiple muscles close it. That seems evolutionarily risky.
It is a risk. If the nerve to that one muscle fails, even on one side, that fold can't be pulled open. Breathing becomes compromised immediately.
Wow. Okay, so the closers, the adductors.
There we have a team. The lateral cricoarytenoid closes the front part, and the interarytenoids pull the arytenoid cartilages together to close the back part.
And then we have the pitch shifters, the tensors and relaxers.
That's the cricothyroid, which we already mentioned. It stretches the folds, tenses them to raise the pitch.
And to lower the pitch.
You have the thyroid and vocalis muscles. They work to shorten and relax the folds, which lowers the pitch. They also help with closing.
Okay, now, the wiring diagram, the innervation. This is where nerve damage becomes a patient's story. It's all coming from the vagus nerve, right?
All from the vagus, which gives off two main branches. First, the superior laryngeal nerve.
Which splits?
It splits. The internal branch is pure sensory for the mucosa above the vocal folds. It's what triggers your cough reflex.
And the external branch?
The external branch is motor to just one muscle, the cricothyroid,
The pitch changer.
the pitch changer. And this is a huge deal for surgeons because that nerve runs right next to the superior thyroid artery.
So during a thyroid surgery,
If it gets nicked, the patient loses the ability to tense their vocal folds. They can't raise their pitch. Their voice becomes flat, monotonous.
okay, and the second big nerve is the recurrent laryngeal nerve.
The workhorse. This one provides motor supply to all the other intrinsic muscles, the opener, all the closers, the relaxers, everything.
So it does most of the heavy lifting.
All of it. And it's sensory to the mucosa below the folds.
Before we move on, there's a really powerful observation here about cancer spread tied to the lymphatics.
This is a massive takeaway. The edge of the true vocal fold has a remarkable paucity of lymphatics. There are very, very few lymphatic vessels right there.
So there's no easy escape route for cancer cells.
Exactly. Which is why a glottic tumor, one that's confined to the true fold, often presents very early with hoarseness, but it's incredibly slow to spread to lymph nodes,
Whereas a cancer just a little bit higher in the supraglottis.
which has a rich lymphatic network, is far more likely to have already spread by the time it's found.
Right.
The anatomy dictates the pathology.
Let's tie it all together then. Phonation, making sound. How does this system vibrate hundreds of times a second?
It's explained by the aerodynamic-myoelastic theory. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty elegant. First, the muscles adduct. They close the vocal folds,
Sealing the airway.
almost sealing it. Then when you breathe out, air pressure, the subglottal pressure, builds up underneath them.
And eventually that pressure just blows them open.
It forces them open for just a millisecond, releasing a puff of air. And here's the genius part. They snap shut again almost instantly.
By themselves.
Two forces do it. First, their own natural elastic recoil, and second, the Bernoulli effect. The fast-moving air passing through that narrow gap creates negative pressure between the folds.
Which sucks them back together.
It literally pulls them shut, and this cycle, pushed open by pressure, sucked shut by physics, repeats hundreds of times a second. That's the buzz of your voice.
That is an exquisite piece of engineering. So that mechanism gives us our voice characteristics. Pitch is tension from the cricothyroid. Loudness is just more air pressure.
More subglottal pressure, right? And the clinical outcomes of nerve damage are now crystal clear. A recurrent laryngeal palsy.
Which controls almost all the muscles.
But it paralyzes the opener and the closers on one side.
Hmm.
The vocal fold just sits there, weakly, in the middle. The result is a weak, hoarse, breathy voice and a serious risk of food going down the wrong way, aspiration.
But if you only damage the superior laryngeal nerve,
Then you lose the cricothyroid. You can still open and close the airway just fine, but you can't tense the folds. You can't change pitch.
that flat, monotonous voice.
Exactly. Unable to sing or shout.
We should also just quickly revisit that tissue difference, the loose, spongy supraglottis that's prone to edema.
And the tightly bound true folds where the swelling stops.
That's why an emergency airway, a laryngotomy, works.
It's a perfect anatomical firewall. If the airway is blocked above the folds, you can make an incision in the cricothyroid membrane below the obstruction and create a bypass. It saves lives because of that anatomical boundary.
That was a really deep exploration of this dynamic world. We've covered the core cartilages, the thyroid, the cricoid ring, the epiglottis, and that key difference between the hyaline that calcifies and the elastic that doesn't.
And we broke down the two critical nerves. The superior laryngeal for sensation above and pitch control versus the recurrent laryngeal, the workhorse that runs almost everything else, including that all-important opener.
So a final thought to leave you with. The human voice, something capable of producing music, complex language, incredible emotion, all of it depends on the tiny coordinated rocking and gliding movements of that cricoarytenoid joint.
And on that elegant, self-regulating dance of the Bernoulli effect, it's a biological instrument of just unparalleled precision that we use every day without a second thought.
An amazing machine. Thank you for diving deep with us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.